Hello everyone, today we're going to be building a medieval mountain house. Here's a block palette if you want to build in this style later, and let's get started. The first thing I had to do was make the terrain for the house. Using Ruled Edit, I could get this done pretty quickly. The way I do this is I make a brush that places sand. Since sand's a gravity block, it can fall into any spots of the terrain that I end up missing. The one downside of this method is that whenever sand falls, it creates an entity on your screen. Whenever you have too many, it creates a lot of lag. So whenever you see like a white spot on my screen or it blinks, that's my render distance, and my computer crying out in pain. Once I had all my sand placed out, I could then switch it into grass blocks, and then move on to the actual house. For these medieval builds, I've noticed that the upper part is always wider than the bottom part. This does look weird at first, but once you add all the details to the walls, it looks really good. On the bottom section of the build, I used deep slate bricks as the main building block. I was hoping this would act as a sort of foundation, and give a sturdy feeling to the whole build. Above that, for the main portion of the house, I used a mixture of calcite and white concrete powder. This was meant to make it look like a wattle and daub material. Adding a mixture of materials would give it more texture and make it look a bit more worn down. I ran into a small issue when I was building windows for this material, because there's no actual stairs for these blocks. So what I used was smooth quartz stairs, because it looks pretty similar to the other blocks. For the roof, I used blackstone bricks with a 2 up 1 over pattern. One thing you might find is when you're building roofs as big as these, if you leave it how it is, it'll look very plain. What I like to do to spruce up the roofs is I like to add dormers. They're just little jutted out sections that can be a room or a window or whatever you want. And what they do is they basically add a bit of depth and detail to the roof. For details, I used spruce planks and logs. I added a frame around the corners and some diagonal support beams for detail. Underneath each window, I put a bit of moss being held by trapdoors. This added a bit more color to the whole build, which helped it blend into its surroundings later. I wanted to put a water wheel on the house on the side of the creek. Water wheels are quite hard to make because of the circular shape. In order to get the shape right, you have to use a mixture of trapdoors and stairs to get it right. It can take a lot of trial and error, but I was able to get it eventually. Even though the water wheel doesn't actually work, it added some detail to the build that I really liked. The last thing I had to do was make this whole area look more natural. I never do this portion until the very end, and take my advice, don't place a single plant in the world until you have finished every structure. It is a real pain trying to build around plants or custom trees you've made, so just don't place them until you're completely done. For the trees, I used a custom variation of the spruce tree. I used stripped spruce trunks and gave them the standard Christmas shaped tree leaves. I only had to actually build 2 versions of this tree. I had one larger version and one shorter version. You never really have to build too many variations of the same tree, but if you find that your area starts looking a bit repetitive, just build a few more variations, or some different types of tree. But in most cases though, most people won't notice that you're using the same tree over and over again, so I usually just save the time. When you start placing in your trees, start with the larger ones first, and keep them spread apart. In the real world, what happens is the bigger trees have been there longer, so they'll be there first, and then the smaller trees, which are younger, will have to grow in between the bigger ones. So it'll look more natural if you do this in your builds. So place the larger ones, spread them out, and then you can fit more smaller trees in between, which makes it look a bit denser and more natural. I also still have to finish the creek near the house. When dealing with water, a technique you'll see people use is they'll place wool instead of water. And then what they'll do is they'll put barrier blocks over the wool. And then once they've done that, they can replace the wool with the water with commands. What this does is it stops the water from moving. So you can have some pretty cool looking water that won't move in the standard vanilla way and destroy everything. Using this method, you can make some pretty cool looking waterfalls, fountains, or other water features. I also added a garden out in front of the house. This would help provide food for the inhabitants of the building, but it would also just fill in the space in front of the house without covering up the build itself. To finish everything off, I added some bone meal to the ground, sprinkled a few rocks around the area, and added a path to the front door. Anyways, that's the video for today. If you liked the video and you want to see more, click this one here. It's a mystery video. I don't know what it is yet. Or you could like the like button on the way out. Also, don't ask me about the interior. Bye-bye.